Hello and welcome to my analysis and review of the Sir Heroescape CCL the finals. And I'm going to be looking through all of the pods and the matchups and giving my thoughts about it. This will be being released after the actual tournament, so this is mostly just predictions and time to see kind of my thoughts and how right I end up being. Draft is a format I tend to like a lot, especially pod draft. The format for this particular one is everyone brought three pods of 250 points and 10 figures. You can go over the figure limit, but you do have to sit figures if you draft that in there. So what we are looking at, and then once both players, they'll have the six pods to work with there. Um, the first player, the dice off winner, well, I guess they get the first player to pick is going to take their choice of one of the six pods. The other player then gets to choose two of the remaining five, with the first player finishing off by grabbing one of the remaining one of the remaining three that they want to have there. So we're going to look through all of them. We're going to talk about the initial matchups and just kind of my thoughts. Um, Like I said, I like this format. I tend to do pretty good at it, but that does not mean I'm going to be correct here. If I get everything correct that I say in this matchup, in this video, uh, that would be a miracle. Anyway, let's get started. I'm going to start with my own army because I can talk about what I'm trying to do with it and how it works and the basic strategy behind it. So I like either creating a kind of rock, paper, scissors effect with my pods, or I like creating weird synergy within it. And went for the synergy option here. I've batted around a couple other options, but I also like to play things that I haven't if I get the opportunity. In this particular instance, I haven't played Zeshan Infantry before, so I decided, let's do that. And then I started building a pod, and I noticed you could fit Warden in there. That's a favorite of Doc's. Then I added in a Wormling, and then I decided, oh, what if I had a Wormling and then Soulborg's in every pod? And that's where this kind of came from. Uh, the pods are probably going to be a little bit on the lower power level compared to some of these other ones, but they can still do some stuff. The uh, There's a synergy between every single pod. Warden boosts the Blastatrons, and Executioner bonds with Session Infantry. Uh, for this one, as we said, Executioner bonds with Session Infantry. But the Hoplatrons also bond with J15 and also give the Blastatrons an additional bonus. These pods 2 and 3 are probably the strongest ones together, with pod 2 being the best as far as synergy options between all of them. However, it's also the weakest of the three pods. And if I face someone with pods that are better than mine, Blastatrons and J15 is usually going to be able to hang with that. So that was my thought process. Was I wanted to give something where the uh, best option to combine with these other ones was the weakest overall pods, and I wanted to give it so that way it's reasonable to combine any two of the pods. Is my thought process on all of this, um, and also giving myself something that's not overpowering with these other less powerful pods. And like if there's Phantom Knights, the Executioner Hoplitron pod is actually probably going to be better than the Blastron J15 pod because um, they'll hold up better and have some pretty good chances of attacking into the Phantom Knights, whereas this pod would not be as likely to do so. So that's the basic thought process behind what's going on there. I'm not necessarily sure I'm going to be able to speak to exactly what the player's intentions are with everyone else's pods, but I am going to kind of give my thoughts on what I think the pod's trying to do. So we're going to start at the top with I don't 100% know how his name is pronounced. I've always pronounced it Foudzing. I've heard Foodsing. I don't know. Either way. Let's take a look at his pods. B11 Resistance Core and Phantom Knights times 2. Both very good units. The next one is Morrow Warriors and Microcorp Agents times 2. And then the last pod is Hornskull Brutes times 2 and Krav Maga. Hornskull Brutes is an interesting choice here, especially because these other squad types, except for the Phantom Knights, tend to be ranged units, which are not which can't really benefit from barge into battle as nicely as some of this other stuff. However, Phantom Knights and Hornskull Brutes is a legitimate combo. In fact, this B11 Resistance Core and Phantom Knights with Hornskull Brutes and Krav Maga agents is probably stronger than any of this other stuff, especially because this whole ranged pod here, Phantom Knights and Krav are better than it. I don't I don't see any reason why it's this middle pod here, despite the potential power of it, with the Mara Warriors just being very good. The problem is that these other pods do kind of counter it, so I don't know if I would honestly be shooting for pods 1 and 3 in this one over pod 2 in most situations. Pod 2 is still pretty good. I'm not 100% sure, like, if I was to be facing it, but basically, I think the big thing is I want to minimize the odds that someone ends up with both pods 1 and 3. So, um, I think if I was to take opening pick, probably go with B11 and Phantom Knights, just because I think it goes well with any of the remaining options. But I can see arguments any other way. It's a whole bunch of really good, solid units. The agents are a little bit of an interesting choice, just because stealth armor it can be a bit swingy for you, whereas the rest of the pod isn't very swingy. So we'll see how that one goes. Next is Sir Heroescape. He has Aberxa Negaxa Roman Legionnaires times 2. I expect we'll probably see some combination of this showing up again. The it's a nice solid pod. There's like nothing really bad about it. And then we've got Major Q10, Marku Essenwine, Raylin, and also again really good units. And then 10th and Marcus. Um, Looking at this, I don't like bringing Raylan to a pod event because it makes it like if you bring Raylan, you kind of want to make your other pod not be one that you're really going to want to have your opponent deal with. And yeah, if you grab this and then your opponent grabs these pods 1 and 3, okay, that is really solid of a build. If your opponent though has any kind of decent other squad, like if say it was the Foudzing and the B11 Resistance Core and Phantom Knights pod or something, I still think this Raylan Q10 is really dangerous. Even with all of these squad figures that you've got here, the problem is that like Q10 can just eviscerate the 10th, and your Romans will could in theory do something, but if there's any kind of decent screen for Q10, you're going to be in trouble. It's not it's not one of those things that I think is unstoppable, but I do think it's one. I think putting Raylan into a pod makes it that much better, and um, and she's just gonna go with everything. And Q10 is really solid into everything. I don't know if this was the strongest these pods could have been. I don't think this particular set of pods. I don't hate it as much as I would normally. I just really don't like putting Raylan in a pod draft. I feel like I I don't I feel like there's a very real possibility that Raylan Q10 and whatever pod from the fourth player, from the second player, will is gonna beat the 10th and Romans builds because Q10 already is pretty good into most of it. So let's go to Chris Perkins. Blade Gruts times 2, Kuthnak Tornak. I do like this. it's a little, I don't know. Kuznak and only eight Blade Gretzes feels a little dicey, but not impossible to work with. And then we've got Marcus, Muburxa, and the Legionnaires again. So this pod is slightly different from the one that Sir Heroescape did, but it's got a more rounded sort of Romans pod. This is probably better. Marcus is slightly better for the Romans than Nigaxa is, but Nigaxa is very swingy and could pull things in the right place. Then finish it off, he's got Bull, Chasers times three, Nirak, and a Swag Rider. So all of these things bond with the Chasers. And I think the thought is that the Blade Gruts and the Chasers build go really nice together. The Chasers also do bond with Maburxa. So you probably actually want to prioritize Pod 3 because there's not really any synergy between either of these two. And so if your opponent takes them, they're going to be in a little bit of a rougher spot. And I do think that the Chasers build is it can fight well with that. So as long as your other opponent, as long as your opponent has another decent pod to go with this, I feel like you pretty much want to lead chasers if you with Chris's pods and have these other two and hope for whichever one of these other two you get put with. Um, Probably, yeah, it's tricky. Um, it's not again. It's one of those things where I think the third pod is the go to pod there, but I don't think it's obvious. I don't think it's again. It's one of those where it's not a situation where I think that you're going to be stuck if your opponent grabs pod three first. I just think it's probably the better call there. Sheep has Aerogruts times two, Bull, Mimring, and Oto. And then Makwa times one, Mohican River Tribe times three, and then the B11 Brave Arrow Rygarn. I like Raylan. I don't like including Rygarn in these pods. However, this is a fairly weakish pod. B11 are good, but Brave Arrow is kind of a little bad on his own here, especially because the only thing that's really going to bond with him are these Mohican River Tribe, which aren't ideal here. Although the Arrowgrets times two and Mimring is also not great. Well, sorry, it's not. It's not. It actually is fairly decent to the Mohican River Tribe. If the pods are at least on a similar level to these or better, I honestly think grabbing B11 and Rygarn is probably the right call to start this off. Just because Rygarn is going to give you so much flexibility throughout the game, he's going to be such a good end game figure, and the B11 are really solid. In the absence of that, uh, yeah, even with that, I think that the Rhygarn pod is just a really good opener because you're going to get something good no matter what on the back end. And like trying to shoot for Mohican River and Arrowgruts isn't something that I think it doesn't really mesh with itself. So there's no real incentive to grab that, try and grab that combo. Kind of like with what Sir Heraskip did here. These two other pods do mesh with each other very well, whereas Sheep's other pods, I'm not as not a, they don't mesh as nicely. So there's not as much of a disincentive to lead Rygarn. Now let's take a look at Ogblaha. And I will say, if I am mispronouncing your username, I'm sorry. I apologize in advance. He's got Axe Grinders and Michael. That is a interesting set of. Let's see, Axe Grinders. Yeah, yeah. You can't get Mogrim, who's better than Michael, but Michael is still pretty solid. And then you've got the Cowboys: Clayton Pierce, Guilty McReach, Kate Crawford, Luis Mad Dog, Marku, and Isamu. I don't love bringing Isamu in pod games because they usually tend to be a bit smaller, and it's very easy for Isamu to win a game that against you. But it's I think it's less likely to hurt you than in uh, Raylan or Rygarn pod. And then he's got Phantom Knights times three and Civ, who can stab you in the back, sort of thing. Um, so let's see here. I honestly think, yeah, Phantom Knights feel like the obvious call from this pool, just because they're really good, and like the dwarves don't play especially well into it, and they don't play especially well into the Cowboys, but the Cowboys do have like they're like grabbing these things together is solid. Like it's not there's not any special synergy there, but you definitely have things you can do. But the Phantom Knights also will, I feel, kind of eat up the Cowboys pretty easily, except for maybe Mad Dog. But yeah, like Kate's special attack, or yeah, Kate's special attack, it's not going to do a ton to a Phantom Knight. So I feel like that's kind of the thing, is that the third pod is kind of the obvious leading pod, and I don't. I said that there's a number of leading pods or something like that. I don't love having a pod that feels like an obvious first pick, because if you do, you basically are hoping to win the dice off, and I don't love hoping to win a dice off. So that's tricky there. Knight of Light has a rock paper scissors thing. Phantom Knights times three and Kate, Morrow Stingers times three and Garrett, and Warriors of Ashra times three and Rhaegar and Oto. Uh, Dropping Oto because you have to drop a figure from that one. Uh, Again, I grabbed the Rhaegar and Ashra. Just Rhaegar is very good. Like Kate is interesting here to help you with the Ashra. And Garrett is interesting to help you with Kate and Rhaegarn, but it's like if you go Asher and your opponent goes Stingers and Phantom Knights, there's a decent chance you're going to get something on the other end. I don't know. Again, I just don't like including Rhaegarn in pods because it's so tempting to go for that. And the thing is, though, I do think that whoever picks second in the Night of Light pool is probably going to have a slight advantage. I don't know. I'd have to. That's my thoughts on that. Now let's look at Raigai. Spiders times three and Causal. Love it. I'm a bit of a Spiders fan, so you know I'm a fan. Nagrubs times three and Contarna, and then Marcus, Maburksa, and Romans. Now, what's nice about these three pods is they're all solid bonding squads. No real synergy with each other, and no real anti-synergy. Like the spiders can't really. The spiders can do some shenanigans and like, but and Maburksa can't really paralyzing stare at these heroes. But I like this. There's it's three pods that I don't know 100% certain which one is the best call in any given matchup. I don't think it's very likely that any of it's going to be the best call in any given matchup. This is a nice way to do this sort of thing. Just build three pods that are all solid. They're about the same level of power, and I think if I was forced to rank them, probably put Romans on top, then spiders, then grubs. But it's close between the spiders and grubs. Um, so yeah, I think they're all very solid. Um, I just yeah. And then I got Vidacious Blood. Sorry, back to Ragai real quick. I like doing three pods of equal power. It's a little tricky if you're trying to play drafting games, but this way kind of ensures you that you're probably going to have good choices no matter what comes your way. So let's move on to Bodacious. We got Cathar Spearman times two, Wyvern times one, Fire Like Spiders times three, Causal, and then Cursus and Quahon. So it feels like the obvious choice is to grab the spiders, because then you're forcing your opponent to either grab the Naked Quahon card. Well, yeah, Quahon and Curses. Curses isn't doing much in that pod. Um, or else they're kind of gonna be stuck. Maybe they can grab the Cathar and the Wyvern, but like if they grab both, no matter what they do, they're giving you a really solid army. I don't love that. I don't love having a choice that looks very obvious to do with that. If you win initiative, if you win the dice off here, great, because you can grab the spiders, and then your opponent kind of is just like, well, I hope whatever I create can beat Quahan, because otherwise I'm in trouble. So it'd be interesting to see how that would play out. Yeah. Or your opponent grabs Quahan in one of their other pods, and then just something ranged, and hopes they can beat this. But I don't know. I just feel like it's very easy for spiders and Kazi to beat Quahan, and especially if they have like a Wolvern or Cathar. Like I don't love it. I don't love it. I feel like it's very much dependent on the dice roll. So then we got Pouncing Wolves, Samu, Warforged Soldiers times 3, solid. Knights of Weston times 2, Sir Gilbert, also solid. And Phantom Knights times 3 and Guilty McCreech. Um, I They're all just really solid defensive squads. My thought is that the Knights are probably the opening pick, unless your opponent has a bunch of range, in which case you go Phantom Knights. But otherwise, grab the Knights. They'll probably outlast the other two. Um, so that's my thoughts on that particular set here. Uh, Cleon went Arrowgrutz, Ice Troll, Otanashi, and 3 Swogs. Blades, Grimnack, Nirak, Threads times 2, Guilty, and Rygarn. Again, I don't love Rygarn here, but it is worth pointing out that the Dreadgulls and Guilty is weaker than these other two. But again, if you get Rygarn, you're gonna be able to shift between these stuff. Yeah, I just think the Rygarn part is the opening pick, because even if your opponent grabs arrows and blades, you're still gonna have a pretty solid choice on your back end, most likely. Uh, and we got Grey Waves, Dwarfs times 3, Cultist times 3, Teeth times 3, and Maltus Tez. Interesting set of things. These both have to drop 2. I probably still grab. If there's a good special attack in the pool, probably grab the Cultists. Otherwise, Dwarves are probably the go-to. Well, if there's anything large or huge, Dwarves are the go-to. Otherwise, I think Cultists have a base 6 move, which would make them, assuming no large, huge, no special attacks, slightly better because they have a pseudo disengage. Um, yeah, I don't know how I feel about this set of. They're all solid, but they're not like. Again, it feels like it's very much 3 pods that are built as kind of counter pods, which it's not a bad strategy. I just feel like it's very easy to get screwed over by the the draft pick order, as it were. So then we've got Baron Scapius. Oh no, sorry, skipped over Baron Scapius. Advantage, Death Chasers of Thess times 3, Marku Nirak, Mimring, Swag Rider times 3, Arrowgrutz times 3, and Krug. So again, this is one of these things where Arrowgrutz and Krug feels like the right opening play, because either your opponent has to grab Mimring with a bunch of useless Swag Riders for that matchup, or they let you get Mimring and 4 Swag Riders with your Arrowgrutz and a very complete, solid army. Like, the Death Chasers pod is fine, but you're not going to have the same level of synergy as this here. So it feels like the opening play is to hope you win initiative, hope you win the win that and go from there, because it's just very yeah, I don't know. It again feels like one of those that you're kind of hoping you win the dice off. If you lose it and your opponent drafts Arrowgrutz, you're in a bit of a rough spot. Uh, Again, not insurmountable. For what it's worth, every pod that I've come across here, I don't think any of these challenges are insurmountable. I just wonder if these are choices that are gonna come back to hurt these players. We'll find out though. Uh, Baron Scapius has Heirloom and two squads of Cultists, two squads of Cathar, and Count Raymond making a rare appearance with Samu. Okay, no, and then Phantom Knights, Guilty, and Bull. You're going to drop one. It's almost always going to be Bull. This is an interesting sort of rock, paper, scissors. The Cathar feel good into both of those. Like Heirloom and Guilty both have range, but they're not to the point where I'm like, yeah, this is absolutely gonna be good against the Cathar. And it feels like whichever one of the yeah. The Cultists and Heirloom is just I don't know. I think Cathar are the leading pick here with Phantoms and Cultists both being a solid pickup on the other end if you don't get it. So I don't know, I don't love it. And I got Moon Knight, Heavies times 2 and Nirak, Knights times 2 and Sorok, Capuans times 2 and Tetrites, which I've never seen that man show up to a tournament, so it'd be cool to see him get play. This is kind of like what Ryguy did, where these are all fairly solid pods about equal level. I think, oh yeah, Capuans, they don't have the Spartacus boost, but Tetrites, I think, can do some stuff. I don't know. They all feel solid. They all feel fairly good, like they can mesh into something well. Yeah, I think there's not really much counterplay between them, but it's also you're pretty much always going to have at least a solid pick. And then Agent Ward went with the big-faced rogue, Ol Ka, and not four Nottingham brigands. And then Marshall the Hire and Vulcan Max. And then Dwarves times 2, Bjorn Boltcutter, and Derek Ambershard. Oh, interesting. Instead of going for Milo, you go for two Bonders, which I don't know if I love with only two squads of Dwarves. Um, Boltcutter does play nice into the Vulcan Max, and Derek bonds with the Brigands. So that's an interesting combo there. Marshall the Hire is solid. And the Vulcan mechs are just very good, but the dwarves play really well into them. I think the opening play, though, is still to grab the dwarves, because no matter what thing you end up with, it's going to be great. I don't think Bjorn can upgrade the Vulcan mechs. Let me confirm that real quick. Yeah, it's got to be a hero. So Bolt Cutter isn't doing anything necessarily here. So that's everyone's pools. Let's take a look at the actual matchups and see what we get. So first we're going to do Bodacious Blood and Foutsing. So let's take a look at those pools again. So Bodacious is the one that has the spiders, Kozil, Thar, Wyvern versus Quahon, and Foutsing's got this setup here, which is interesting because I was talking about how um, I think I said B11 of Phantom Knights is the leading pod for Foutsing, and Spiders and Kazi is the leading pod for Bodacious. In this combo together, Spiders times 3, Kazi Quahon versus against this stuff here. This is all really solid stuff that has. I think whoever leads it off. I think you have to go, well, because the Cathar, there's just so many. Where is it? The Cathar between Quahon, B11, Microcorp, Krob, your opponent is going to have a range squad. There's no way you can stop them from having something with range. And Kazi kind of doesn't care if he gets some wounds on him, so the Cathar feel like a really bad pick in this matchup. So I think the opening pick, I'm not 100% certain on it, but I think the opening pick is the Spiders pick. Um, and then the opponent, if you grab Quahan and Cursus, and then any one of those three thought pods from Falzing, I feel like you still lose to whichever one is left. Like even if you grab the Phantom Knights and B11s, I just feel like you just don't have enough to go against the Hornskull Roots and Crop. So you basically, I think, give your opponent on the back end, in this case Bodacious, the ability to, or I guess whoever it is, you grab the person who led with the Spiders and Causal. You'll probably want to just grab the Brutes and the Phantom Knights. Is that right? Yeah, I think I like that slightly better. Brutes and Phantom Knights, so that way, even if they do grab Cathar, which I think it depends on the map, but my thought is you probably want, where is it? The Spearmen aren't doing a whole lot for you here. I mean, they might kill some Brutes and Phantom Knights, which might be something that you need. Over can definitely do shenanigans. Uh, Krav and B11 though are really solid into this, and they can both of them will just eat up the Cathar. So I think you honestly just go Quahan, and yeah, I think you just go Quahan. I don't love it, but I think that's what you do. Um, there's an argument for doing Mara Warriors and Microcorp agents, but I think even with that, so yeah. I guess the other option would be to have the first person lead with B11 and Phantom Knights. Uh, and then the other person grabs one of those spider pools. Basically, I suspect that no matter how this draft shakes out, one person is probably going to be playing spiders and Quahan, while the other person is probably going to be playing pod 1 and 3 from Falzing. Every time that I kind of play this out in my head, every way that I shifted, and I think there's a slight edge to the person, just because it's a lot of figures to get through, but also Quahan is really good. I think I'd probably go to the edge to Foutsing Pods, but it's close. It's a close matchup that I think goes either way. So let's go down to Agent Ward versus Ogblaha. Uh, so Ogblaha's got these here, and Agent Ward. Oh, they both have dwarves. This is one of the dangers of bringing certain common squads, and there's no overlap between heroes. The opening pick has got to be the dwarves. I think it's actually I think you grab Agent Ward's dwarves. Yeah. Yeah, you grab Agent Ward's dwarves. Well, yeah, you grab Agent Ward's dwarves. And the other person grabs Phantom Knights and Axe Grinders, because then it makes it very hard to grab any of these remaining pods. I think you still grab the Brigands, though. I think the Brigands are the right call, just because you get another Bonder for Derek. You can try and have the dwarves sort of blast through as many Phantom Knights as possible. Vulcan Mech and Centaurborgs and the Cowboys aren't doing a whole ton for you. So I think that's kind of the play, is that one person ends up with pods 1 and 3 from Agent Ward, and one person ends up with pods 1 and 3 from Ogbaha. Or at least these are what I think are the optimal draft plays. I think the edge goes to probably the Phantom Knights player, just because but the Bergens player can absolutely win it. Ka is no slouch, especially yeah, Ka is no slouch. Um, Although, fun fact with Ka and Michael interaction, Ka only gets to do one wound at a time. So that's cool. So going down here, Moon Knight versus Night of Lights. I remember liking both of their pots. Okay, so Moon Knight's got this set here, and Night of Lights got this set here. The opening pick is obvious. It's got to be the Astras. It's got to be the Astra. Um, Astra and Rygarn. And then I think it's Stingers times three and Phantom Knights times three. And then I probably go Heavies and Nirak. Is what I think is the right call there. But I can very easily see an argument for swapping around. But I think that the Knights and Caplans don't see play, but all three of these other pods see play in some. Basically, all of these pods see play in some order. And I like the person that has the Rygarn pod more because, yeah, the Ashra not only have the Rygarn pod with them, they're good into every single one of these pods. So, Ryguy and Grey Waves, I remember saying they both kind of had, you know, fairly inoffensive pods and stuff. So we got, or not inoffensive. Um, yeah, there wasn't much in the way of either synergy or counters. So looking at, I think the opening pick, I think the opening pick is the dwarves because all of Ryguy's pods have a target for the dwarves, and you're gonna have a chance at one of them. So you kind of force your opponent, and cultists don't really play well into this pool, and the teeth are also not great into this pool. Um, like the two defense, you got two attack. Like spiders and the grubs both love seeing figures as two defense. So I think honestly, yeah, I grab spiders and Romans, and then grubs and dwarves. So I think that's the play. I don't love it, but I do think that's the play. As you also notice, that would mean that the person with Versa is the only range, but also, dwarves. So, yeah, I think edge there I'd probably give to. I think I give it to whichever side has the dwarves. Flipping over to the other side of things, we got Baron Scapius and Chris Perkins. So, Baron Scapius here with the Cathar build and the Knights, Phantom Knights that are both really solid. On Chris Perkins with none of the. Okay, so um, all of these units are fine into Cathar, and none of them really hate Phantom Knights. So honestly, yeah, I think the opening pick is the Chaser build. And then, yeah, you're either getting Phantom Knights times three, which is still going to be really solid, or your choice of Cathar Spearman as well. That's also not bad. Unless your opponent takes and it's probably the right call to take the remaining two pods to minimize synergy that the chasers will be getting. But yeah, I think you do that, and the person with chasers, I lean this just because it'll make choices for these pods. Whereas Phantom Knights don't really give you as many choices. If just because there's not a lot of like sure Maburksa, but that's it. Maburksa can paralyzing stare anyway, so that's my thought process on what's going to be the right call there. I think the edge goes to the person that gets the chaser pod. Then we got sheep and Sir Hero Escape. So Sir Hero Escape's pod's here, and sheep's here. Oh, so Sheep's got Rhaegarn. So Heroescape's got Raylan. Both of those figures that I said I didn't think was a great idea. I don't love including in pods. Of the two pods, the Raylan pod is stronger. However, Sheep's pods. So if you went Raylan, Marku Q10, and Sheep went 10th, Romans, and then you grabbed Arrowguts and yeah, I think I grabbed the Raylan pod to start with, and then if you leave me any of those, I'm taking it. Otherwise, I'm grabbing Arrowguts and Mimring, which Arrowguts and Mimring can wreck all of this stuff quite easily. So yeah, this is why I don't like bringing the bringing Raylan or Rhaegarn. I mean, the Rhaegarn pod is not super useful in this matchup, but that's only because there's a Raylan pod available, which I think Raylan is worse than Rhaegarn for those things. But I do think that anyway. So that's my play, and I think both sides can win it. I just think the pod that has Raylan is gonna have the edge. Pouncing Wolves and Cleon. I think they're both near each other. Yep, they're right next to each other. Okay. So first off, good. No one has any duplicates. These Phantom Knights aren't really doing much. So yeah, you grab the Raiders. You grab the Raiders. You're gonna get another good pod. It's either gonna be Phantom Knights times 3 or Knights, whichever one's gonna fit. Like you grab the Rhaegarn pod. Even if they grab this, it's not. You're still gonna have good stuff, and then I think the Rhaegarn pod is just gonna be the better pod. So grab Rhaegarn, take whatever comes in response. I think the best choices are probably going to be the pods that come with, although Knights and Gilbert is tempting. Uh, Phantom Knights times 3 is interesting, but I don't think it's that good. Worth noting, if you do grab the Phantom Knights pod, you're going to have to drop one of the creatures, which, whatever. Yeah, yeah, I think you're going to have a good pod no matter what. So you grab the Rhaegarn to start with here, and then whichever pod has Rhaegarn, I think I like slightly better. But I do think that this pod combo can do some real damage. So, and then there's me and Evan. Advantage. And again, I think the opening call is to grab Arrowgruts times 3 and Krug, and then Bemring and Swag Rider. Yeah, on the back end. As like if there's a very real argument to grab Arrowgruts times 3 Krug and then grab this on the back end. That might be the right call there. Because then I think you just grab the Blastotrons and J15 and hope for the best because this set of things is not incredible, but it might be slightly better choice than letting this exist. So I think is leading Arrowgrets times because the thing is if you don't lead Arrowgrets times 3, then you let your opponent grab this. You kind of have to force them to take this, and then well, there's actually an argument to grab the Hoptrons. Anyway, I think that I, s- I think if you grab this, there's a very real shot you can pull it off. Killing Krug is going to be a pain. Uh, yeah, but I think, and yeah, especially with Blastotrons and White Wormling, there's a lot that they can do with that, and you only are going to have 9 squad figures as opposed to your opponent who's going to have a lot more than that. So, oh, oh no, wait, no, we're all good. So yeah, I think that's the right call. I don't love it, but I think the opening call is you got to lead Arrowrats times 3, and then take whatever comes back to you of those 4. Depending on if the map is really bad for Arrowrats, though, it might be worth it to lead with the Chaser pod. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I'm gonna probably think it over, take a look at the maps, but my strategy in that matchup would be to lead with the opening uh, of the Arrogats and call it good. So that's all the matchups opening. I don't really know how correct I'm going to be. I will probably post a retrospective after the tournament and call it good. Uh, anyway, thanks for showing up and watching. Best of luck to everyone in the tournament. I know it'll probably have already happened when this comes out. Have a great rest of your day,